Inspired to Learn, Kansas Stories. Again, Learning Forward Kansas is excited to share this video series with Kansas educators and with all educators. Our videos celebrate Kansas educators who are leading professional learning and redesign in all of our schools. Across Kansas, educators and students are inspired to learn. We see this in every part of our state, from Pittsburgh to Peabody, from Holton to Hayes, from Meade to Manhattan, and from Greensburg to Gardner. The size of the district makes no difference. Educators are inspired for students to become successful adults. We explored why professional learning matters in our first video and examined what professional learning looks like in our second video. Then in the first of our 3 How videos, we focused on learning communities, examining what it takes and what it looks like. Understanding the why and the what helps us select learning designs that make us better together. It also enables educators to redesign learning experiences that promote growth through collaboration, teachers learning with each other, that builds collective efficacy.
When we think about learning designs, it's really important that all of us are learners. We all can grow. It's about continuous improvement, about working together collaboratively to achieve our goals. And so learning designs provides an important role in professional learning, because what we're expecting to see in the classroom, we really need to be modeling and using with our administrators, with our teacher leaders, any type of meeting that we're having as adults. How do we model best practice?
We're fostering collaboration amongst our teacher colleagues. One of the things we want to make sure of is that it's a safe place for them to talk. Also, great collaboration is when we get to reach out to people who are very similar to us in similar situations. That's rough to do in small towns and small communities. So how do we reach people where they are, when they need it, with people that matter? And that's where I think that my online collaborative community is invaluable. You may be the only community in the area that is doing something like that. I'll bet somebody else in the world is doing it. It might be on another part of the country, but they're there, and reach out to them and you can learn.
This video, Better Together, explores the professional learning standard or condition learning designs. Each learning design promotes collaboration. Better together. The next and final video in this series, Leaders Matter, focuses on the role of leaders, including teacher leaders, all leaders, in creating a culture of learning and success for all. As we all know, it takes all 7 of the professional learning standards or conditions to create that effective professional learning culture that changes our practice. We continue our thinking around how it happens by examining many types or categories of professional learning beyond a workshop or a conference. What is the intent and scope of collaborative professional learning? As we have analyzed the why and the what in our earlier videos, designing the how is not as hard as we initially imagined, and with practice will just come naturally. Stephanie Hirsch, Executive Director of Learning Forward, writes, "In my view, no learning model has captured educators' attention more than collaborative learning experiences." In the past, when educators thought about professional learning, they thought of a PD day on their district calendar or a guest speaker, maybe a conference or a workshop, or maybe even a graduate course. All of these can be worthwhile learning experiences and might be a starting point for change. The key to change is collaboration within our school or our team or our district. Collaboration reduces isolation in addition to increasing trust, increasing job satisfaction, and increasing shared leadership. Most importantly, collaboration leads to changed practice. How does this happen in schools across Kansas? There are many wonderful examples that we will be sharing in this video.
It wasn't always a collaborative culture here. I think when I came, we all worked in our rooms and it was separated. And as time went on, PLCs became very popular, and we realized that we all wanted what was best for kids.
I feel like if I've learned anything traditional, and a lot of this goes back to when I was a teacher, sitting and with people who have varying degrees of ability to integrate, maybe with technology or a specific lesson element or whatever. Whenever you're getting that all together, it's just like with students. You need to be targeted. You need to know where people are at. And so oftentimes that's not as effective. So we're learning that personalized professional learning is important.
We are no longer just a teacher in a classroom. We are a floor of teachers. The kids see us talking in the hallways about the different activities that we're doing, and we're getting collaboration back from our co-teachers. The kids see it on a daily basis that we do talk, we do interact. If we have a question, we go to somebody else. They're learning that same technique, that question answer, how do you make it work? It has brought us together as a team.
Our friend Joellen Killian states, in Becoming a Learning School, the concept of school-based professional learning recognizes that the school is the primary center of learning and that teachers can often learn best from each other. When learning is school-based, teachers are engaged every day in learning, teaching, monitoring, and refining to improve what they do in their classrooms. School is where the magic happens. School-based professional learning opens the doors to the brilliance in the classroom next door or the classroom down the hall. This video highlights specific learning designs that showcase educators learning together. They are better together. We will go inside Kansas schools and classrooms and examine a variety of designs, recognizing that you and your colleagues may select other learning designs depending on your goals and your learning needs. We created 5 categories of learning designs and included examples of each. Some designs may overlap into several categories. As we look at each category, please consider your own knowledge or experience related to each category. The first category is networking. That might include Twitter, Voxer, Google Classroom, and other similar platforms. The second category, Learning Together, explores book studies and ed camps. The third category, the core, C-O-R-E, includes conversations, observations, reflections, plus enthusiasm. This might look like teacher rounds, critical friends, peer observations, observe me, or model classroom opportunities. The fourth category, collaborative dialogue. This is where we plan together. We plan curriculum. We might plan authentic learning experiences, such as project or passion-based learning, or we might plan and develop common assessments. The last category is analyze, reflection, as we reflect on data and student work and our own practices. As you see, there are many ways to learn collaboratively. We have named only a few. What they all have in common is that they are job-embedded learning and go beyond a formal or structured workshop or conference. Job-embedded, just-in-time learning may begin with hallway conversations, but then it expands to include multiple ways of connecting colleagues to improve teaching and learning. Let's look at a few. No matter how it happens, the goal is to go from knowing to doing. Learning is not a spectator sport. Research tells us that some learning designs are more likely to shift practice, but all learning designs can do this when connected to other learning and within a collaborative learning culture. Different learning designs require different amounts of trust among learners. Learning designs also might require different levels of structure. The structure of a design can help or hinder learning. Learning designs also result in different outcomes, so it is so important to understand your why or your purpose and what you hope to accomplish. Learning leaders select learning designs knowing the why, the who, the how, and the what, and they know one size does not fit all. This chart, adapted from Learning Forward's Becoming a Learning System, gives examples of different designs and the characteristics of each. As a standalone design, some are more likely than others to shift our practice because of the level of trust, complexity, and organization. Again, learning leaders select designs carefully. Digging deeper into learning designs, we know there are many factors to consider, also adapted from Becoming a Learning System. As a learning leader, one might address each of these 6 factors as you focus on your long-range goals for your building or district. The first factor is, what are the goals of the learning or the redesign efforts? What are the goals for students? What are the goals for educators? The second factor, the characteristics of the educators. Is there a culture of learning? Do they have collaboration skills already? What is the comfort that they have with learning process and working with one another? And what is the level of trust among all educators? The third factor is the familiarity with the content or the change. The fourth factor, what are the attributes of that change? Is it a huge change? What is the magnitude of the expected change? Also, what's the timeline for the change? How different is the change compared to current practice? The fifth factor focuses on what is the educator's work or learning environment. So where is this learning taking place? What is the timing, the location, the people involved? Are there goodies for everyone? That's the learning environment. And the sixth factor is, what are the resources to support the learning? Has there been time provided, materials, technology, leadership? These are 6 factors, although there may be others, that learning leaders want to consider as they plan and implement redesign, professional learning, and change. Again, we want to keep our motto in mind. At our school, it is everyone's job to learn. By definition, collaboration reduces isolation for teachers. Collaborative learning creates a formal structure for communication and learning with one another. A framework for collaborative learning offers a consistent and reliable means for educators to find support, solve problems, and grow as a result of working together to improve their practice. As we redesign our schools, we see a traditional model of organizing students and educators shifting to a more collaborative learning experience. This deepens our commitment to a culture of learning. Let's see how Kansas schools are going about moving from knowing to doing. From the original model, we will continue with a graphic of the how component that lists the 5 categories: networking, learning together, core, collaborative dialogue, and analyze reflection. There are many learning designs with each of these 5 categories. We have selected designs for each category used by Kansas schools that you may find useful. We will begin with the category of networking. Many Kansas educators are reaching beyond their own classrooms and districts to learn and collaborate. This networking, often referred to as a professional learning network or a PLN, has become easier using technology tools such as Voxer, Twitter, Facebook, and Google Classroom, plus many more. Of course, not all networking relies on technology or social media. Powerful learning happens whenever and wherever educators reach out and support each other.
We know that things like whatever term you want to use, cooperative learning, collaborative learning, project-based learning, is that as we discuss things and talk about them, we naturally learn about them and we find ways to implement them. So I try to find groups of people that I can talk with these things about. I have, sometimes it's in the group that's there, and then I have a group of people who I really try to just run things by. A set of people that I trust that it's like, hey, maybe they're in my content area, maybe they're not. So I try to have that group. And then I have my local group here at the school of how do they see it. As I go through that process a lot, the thing I find is that I need to really make sure I get a pretty broad base, because we talk about what works here in Kansas. Now, when I hear Kansas, keep in mind I'm talking about Ness City. I'm talking about a 2A school. I'm talking about rural Kansas. What works in Ness City is going to have to be tweaked a little bit from what works in Overland Park, to what works in Dodge City, to what works in Minneapolis, to what works in Colby. We have very different things of how we can implement it. So I try to get that wide base. I try to talk to math teachers from different districts. I try to talk from big districts, from small districts. I try to make sure I talk to science teachers, to English teachers, and see what am I missing here when I'm putting things together. So big picture, that's what I try to do, is after I learn it and get into it, where do I bounce ideas off of? Do I use Twitter a little bit? Yeah, I use Twitter a little bit. I try to do webinars a little bit when the time suits me. So, and then I just try to be involved in the conversation.
So just that sharing happens organically, but it also, we have scheduled times each month where we put heads together and learn from each other. We also learn from each other through just our 2 elementary school principals right now and I have a Voxer group, and this is a group where it's also known as a mastermind group, where you really just daily are committed to challenging each other through just the exchanging of ideas, reflecting, advising, etc. But just those daily check-ins are extremely powerful. And the nice thing about Voxer is I have their ideas saved. I can go back to that audio file or that text at any time as a reminder, as I really think about ways in which I want to grow and learn.
I think that a lot of that shift in our culture has come through technology. I think that, like, this was the first summer that when we left in May, we didn't actually leave. We met once a week throughout summer. We voxed on Voxer every day. We're tweeting out ideas, hashtagging each other and things. I just feel like that type of learning and collaborating didn't stop just because the contract time stopped. I think that is something that great educators have always craved. They've just never had a means to do it without going to a conference or going, and it didn't cost us anything to share a tweet or, to send a Vox. And sometimes our best conversations happen at 9:45 at night after we know all of our kids are in bed.
I think it allows that the personal conversation to take place on a technology time to where you can listen to the conversation later. It's still much more personal, and you have that back and forth. A lot more. Twitter is a research tool. You know, we're sharing, rather than, oh, I need to print this off and I'll share it at our next meeting, or I'll share it in August. It's bam, at Amber Neighbor, and she has it, and hey, I really like that article, here's one I found. And creating that collection, hashtag VHSELA, where we, you know, have an entire column on TweetDeck that is nothing but ideas for our classes and for each other's classes. So yeah, I think technology's been, and then that turns around and they post that we're going to do this, and then our kids become much more intent on their work, much more engaged in their activity, much more into what they're going to do. So how did that trickle down to the kids, which is the whole purpose for doing it in the first place?
I think that the biggest way that we learn and connect with other teachers and get our professional development in is by connecting through the use of technology, whether it's mostly Twitter or I would say Facebook. I belong to a couple big Facebook groups. One is the Global Read Aloud. I connect with teachers all over the United States and especially all over the world. My class is currently interacting with all of them, and I'm getting ideas from them, the teachers, to, you know, take my learning with my students a little bit different way. I guarantee it. And they have certain days that they meet and times, and you get on there and there's a moderator asking questions, and inevitably I end up, oh, I really like this one person and what they're saying. I feel like I connect to them. So then we exchange email addresses and even sometimes a phone call. And then we start talking and connect, and then we end up having our classrooms connect. And they turn me on to other ideas of ways to learn. Oh, have you heard of this book? Or have you heard of this person?
I have learned a lot from the teachers in the Kansas area. We live in Western Kansas, where I am the only 8, 10, 12 English teacher. So I have to go beyond my walls to be able to collab with other English teachers like me. And one place I'm collabing is Voxer. It's an app. I have some Kansas teacher friends that I met on Twitter, and we do a Kansas Ed chat, and I've met them there, and I know they're amazing teachers from Bueller especially, and so they, I Vox them a question, and then they can talk back. And the great thing about Voxer is you can hear their intonation, you can hear the ideas that they have, because it's all voice recorded. And so I really get a lot of ideas from them, and I bounce ideas off of them. One of the things we did was two Bueller teachers do a poetry slam, and their kids write poetry, and then they went out on Twitter and they asked, and Voxer, and they asked all these teachers to have their kids read the poems and critique them. And so we did that for them, and then we got to go on Twitter and Voxer and give them feedback and their kids' feedback. And my kids were just so excited to be able to collaborate with kids outside of their building, which they don't always get to do.
The idea of the nerd camps and the ed camps. And that was probably one of the biggest things that I heard just from teachers, was when we held our own ed camp, and the teachers here, just the feedback from them that this actually wasn't a waste of a day, that I learned things that I could use immediately. And going to like the nerd camp that was just English focused was so neat, because I got ideas from, like you said, across district lines and across states, and made connections with authors that now I can make things more real. But that was all put on and developed by teachers for teachers. And I think that that's the biggest thing too, is when we as teachers can develop and decide on what we want to learn, like we decide to talk to different people, that's when we're actually going to learn and build who we are as teachers as well.
I'm a co-host of Ed Camp in Dodge City, Kansas Ed Camp, and so we get to organize that every summer. And the amount of professional learning in such a free, unconference atmosphere is unbelievable to me. I mean, it's some of the best professional development that I've had, because we're working with teachers who are in the trenches every day, asking them the questions we need to ask, and getting the knowledge from them that we need. Those connections that I've made through those ed camps then follow me on Twitter and Boxer. And so then I have just all of the experts at my fingertips anytime I need them, which is great for me because this is my first year teaching high school ELA. And so being able to get ideas from them and bounce ideas off of them and really make my class relevant for my kids, because I see what they're doing in other districts, and we can bring that in a city. Even though we're kind of out in the middle of nowhere, that does not stop us anymore.
Learning together. Collaborative learning can also be done within the building as educators learn together. For example, book studies can be done as pre-work for a new initiative, expanding knowledge of effective practices or to build on previous learning. Book studies can be organized in small groups or as an entire staff that includes licensed, classified board members and site council members. Book studies done effectively plant the seeds to improve practice, as we see in the following examples.
In everything that I do, or every new initiative that we bring to the table, we have to dig in and learn what that is, and I try to model that for them. So for an example, we did a book study on creating language-rich classrooms. And so we had a group of about 8 teachers who studied the book. We met twice a week, every other week, and just had conversations about what was in the book, but not just conversations about what was in the book, but what's next. Now what? So now what? What are we going to do with this information that we have? Because so many times the book goes back on the shelf, nothing gets done with that professional learning. So our goal is what's going to get done with that professional learning? Where is this going to go? What are we going to do? So with that then, the activities in the book we actually did as our book study, and we played the concentration game to show how it increased the level of critical thinking that is required by the kids. It was actually challenging for some of us at times. We did the tangram activity in a different way to increase the level of critical thinking again. And in order for us to feel what it's going to feel like, or how to do that with our kids, we have to experience it, and we have to be a part of that. And as teachers, a lot of us are such visual learners that that's how we learn. And so anyway, we then made a list after the book study. These are the things that the rest of the staff needs to know about this book. And again, so it doesn't just get put on the shelf. And so at our next staff meeting, I have then developed the concentration cards for all of the staff to use, and we're going to play, and it's going to be challenging for the staff, and they're going to see how the way this is done increases the level of critical thinking, which is of course what we want. In addition, I have cut out all the tangram patterns, and we're going to again play together the game so that we can see how it needs to be done in the classroom. And it was a powerful learning experience for the teachers in that group of the book study to see or to come to the realization that we do have to experience it. And so that's how we decided to take it on to the rest of our staff.
The expectation is that everyone here is going to learn, from the school board to licensed staff, administrators, and classified staff. So for example, when the legislature decided that we all needed to focus on anti-bullying, we purchased copies of Barbara Colarosa's book, The Bully, the Bullied, and the Bystander, for every employee in the school district and all the school board members, and we did a book study on that prior to bringing her in for a full day to work with all staff and then have a parent meeting in the evening. And I don't think many people did quite that much in terms of focusing on that particular initiative, but it's that important, and we wanted to make sure that we included everyone. From my first board meeting here, we had the board involved in learning as well. The very first thing I did was to have the cabinet and the school board read Good to Great, and not just read it, but study it and discuss it. The board got to discuss it at open school board meetings. So that was a little exciting for them as well.
When we started our work with energy leadership, the principal's been through the 3-day training. We had read the book as a cabinet before we ever started taking it into the classrooms. So we bought that book for every single staff member. So even the maintenance guys who work on our buses and mow our lawns read energy leadership. So the principals had already read it. They were now going to lead, principals and directors were now going to lead professional learning around that book and that content in their buildings or with their staff. So to get them back into the book, they created a study guide. So we went back into the book. Principals and cabinet put together a study guide for the book, and then they were able to use that material as they went out and worked with their staff. It refreshed their memories, got them back into the content. So it's never a one and done. It's always a how do we continue to bring that back to life? Because sustaining something is way more challenging, gives you better opportunities than just, well, we did that event, now let's go on to the next piece of professional learning. Embedding in what we do, bringing it to life, giving it legs, that's the important part, because that's where it changes instruction for kids.
We decided at the beginning of this year that we wanted to do the book study, The Boy Who Was Raised as a Dog by Dr. Bruce Perry. So I've been using that as a guide. We go chapter by chapter every month. We handle a different chapter, and I take some of the training that I've received from the Child Trauma Academy and insert some of my neurosequential model and education presentation into what we're doing here as a staff. We focus on the case studies that are exhibited in the book. We focus on how to look at those from an educational standpoint, how to understand students who have experienced trauma in our building, and how our reactions to misbehaviors or behaviors in general can increase or decrease student misbehaviors as directly related to having experienced trauma. Seen a lot of success with this so far this school year in changing our practices and in changing our mindsets as adults in the building. We're having a big effect on our student behaviors. We have decreased our overall office and discipline referrals by over 50% from this time last year to this time this year.
CORE, C-O-R-E. A very effective way to learn from each other is to watch each other teach inside our classrooms. We have identified 4 core practices when learning from each other: conversation, observation, reflection equals enthusiasm. These learning walks inside classrooms have many names and different purposes. They include peer observations, critical friends, teacher rounds, lesson studies, observe me, pineapple charts, and model classrooms. These observations differ from the traditional walkthroughs in that they are about learning together and not evaluative. Again, schools incorporate learning walks into a variety of ways, both formally and informally. There are several formal models for observations that have specific formats and purposes. We're going to look at 2. Teacher rounds and peer observation. The main difference between these models is that teacher rounds usually include a small group of observers, and peer observations are often done by just one observer. We will begin with examples of teacher rounds.
I kind of singled out some teacher leaders in our building, and I sold them on the idea of what we were wanting to do and what the focus of that was going to be. I shared with them some different strategies. You know, Marzano has a teacher round strategy, and there were several books that we did book studies on over the summer. And so I shared that information with them, and I kind of let them look through it. And through guided discussion, we kind of landed on the Marzano strategy as being the one that was probably the easiest to implement for us in a short turnaround. Well, you know, they went into it with several different levels of concern or just nervousness about it. Building wide, I thought it was interesting. I sent an email out to the entire staff saying, this is what we're doing. If you don't want to be observed, let me know. And then at the same time, the ones that were visited, they might say, hey, what'd you see? Did you, of course, I think we're all that way. I think if we're intrinsically motivated, like, hey, did you see anything I need to fix, or that type of thing. And they got a lot of affirmation from the team that was like, wow, I was really impressed with the way you handled this situation or that. And so it ended up being extremely positive. Now, when the team came out of the meeting, they had additional questions that they answered for themselves. These weren't anything they turned into me. I didn't ask for them, although several of them did give them to me just simply because they wanted to share. But the questions they had to answer afterwards was, what was validated for me as a part of this visit? What do I question about my own practice? Maybe something I saw that makes me, oh, why do I do it that way? And then finally, what I plan to implement in my own practice. So what are you taking away from this? What are you going to implement? And so they shared that also at that next in-service. And so then what I asked is I asked each one of them, there were 3 of them, I asked each one of those to then create a team of 3. And they were, we had teachers jumping at the opportunity. I had no one requesting not to be observed. And so just last month we finished, everyone in our building has been through at least once. Several have been through more than one. And they love it. And I've got a lot of positive comments about this is probably some of the best professional development I've been involved in a while, simply because it was self-directed. And they came away with the results that they needed or wanted from that, and then they could implement that. And then I think one of the things they probably enjoyed more than anything else was then the sharing out in our staff meetings, because they got to get up and talk about it. They got to brag on their peers. They got to talk about how they had taken that stuff back and how they had implemented it. So they got an opportunity maybe to indirectly, backhandedly brag about themselves a little bit, but they got to talk about what they picked up. And so I can tell you that in our building, the advantages have really been big, because it's been not just what the goal was, and the goal of this was for teachers to improve their own practice. That was the bottom line. But what it's done is it's created better camaraderie. It's changed the building climate. There's less close the door and I'm doing my stuff and you do your stuff. There's a lot less of that. There's more sharing. It's created more of that collaborative spirit, which is what we've all been striving for so long. And so this was a huge positive for us. And as I move forward in education, I'll be taking this with me.
I think the most powerful thing, the big picture of Teacher Rounds for all of us, is the climate that it creates in our building. We find that our own teachers are sometimes our best experts, and that it doesn't need to be difficult to find a good lesson or a strategy. It could be just as simple as going down the hallway. One thing in organizing Teacher Rounds that is important is that we make sure that everybody gets a chance to be an observer. That takes a lot of planning and a lot of time. Teachers submit a form stating whether or not they would like to be observed. We also try to make our groups based on teacher experience and teacher personality. We want teachers, some of the veteran teachers, to have their input in the reflection piece, as well as some of our younger teachers. We also want teachers with different personalities, some that are more shy and quiet and afraid to speak, to be with some of our teachers that are very encouraging to each other. So available on what date? We try to get them in a variety of rooms also. We want not only the observers to be mixed levels and mixed ages, but we want the observation, the classroom that they go see, to be a mixed group as well. One thing I like as a teacher is that it's very real. We tell our teachers not to plan something specifically to be observed. We want to come in the classroom and see what's really happening. We want to see the morning routine. We want to see simple transitions. We don't want it to be out of the norm. This is important in our building because we feel that our teachers are powerful and that we have some of the best in our own building, and this is where we need to start with each other, and it builds relationships.
Well, one of the things that we did was some background research, and so we did a summer book study. I read a book that was about Teacher Rounds, and the other administrator at Southwest read a book. We looked at some things on the internet that we could find on Teacher Rounds, and then we compared notes. We brought a couple of the leaders in our building, our teacher leaders, in and presented that, and what we came out with is, every school has a culture, and your faculty, and your needs. And so really when we came up with our first plan, we did not take any book or any specific program that we found on the internet in its purest form, and we definitely did some combining and reworking, and we understand, and we continue to understand, that Teacher Rounds is it's a process. And at the end of every year, like we did last year, we asked our staff, what would you change? What what went well. This is important also and very well supported by our central office and our superintendent, and they have allocated money for us to be able to work with our teacher rounds. It does require 4 or 5 full-time substitutes during the day, depending on how many observers you have. We have had teachers that have said, you know, this is some of the best professional development I've had. I actually enjoy this more than going to a conference because, you know, the old saying, a picture is worth 1,000 words. And when you can, you know, go in and really see it in action, it's really special, rather than necessarily reading it in a book or hearing someone just kind of talk to you about, you know, this is the theory and this is what I would do. You can actually see kids and see, you know, how things are happening in other classrooms. They will go into a classroom for a 30-minute time period, and they are to look at several things. You know, they can take notes or whatnot. They're looking for validation. They are looking for new ideas. What are they questioning about their own teaching? Those kinds of things. Of course, they're also picking up on things like the room environment and how things are organized and all kinds of things that go into a classroom. At the end of the 30-minute period, they go through a 15-minute debrief with their team, and that's where they specifically address those questions. It is confidential. Administrators are not part of that process, and we want teachers to understand that it is not evaluatory.
We have heard about the process of teacher rounds and how it is organized. Now, let's take a peek inside a debrief session so we can hear the conversations, the questions, the reflections, and the next steps.
Said that, you know, just thinking of different visuals to help with math, because kids love expo markers. Yes. They love to write with them and anything they can do. So, yeah, I love the different visuals that really kind of becomes relevant and solidifies. Talked about with the energy, you know, the yoga breathing and making them become more aware of, okay, do you feel more relaxed? No? Okay, then they did a couple more just to make them kind of think about how relaxed they felt, so they're self-monitoring.
Sure. I thought it was pretty, when she said 12, and they all thought she had said 20, but I mean, it was such innocence. I mean, they truly, she said, how many did I say? And they were like, 20. And you know, how many times do we give directions and just assume the kids are misbehaving, whereas typically, I mean, that for instance, that instance, they just didn't understand.
Right. It made me question about my own teaching handwriting. You know, walking around and seeing the grips and different things of what I need to do in my own classroom to help with pencil grip, since we don't do it as much with all.
Something that I wrote about questioning your own teaching is like, we have students move around a lot because that's kind of the nature of how classrooms work for all of us, but are they really moving in a way that's exerting enough energy to where they'll be able to transition into the next activity? I mean, by the time they get to 4th grade, they should be more self-aware, like you're saying, but still occasionally you do need to take those movement breaks, like a long stretch in between music and PE.
I did notice that she has some wobble stools in there too, so she's obviously got some kids that really need some movement. So they were doing very well, I thought, for having worked at it for a while, like she said.
You could tell she's worked a lot with peer tutoring, because the little guy that I was sitting and helping, the people around him were very aware, and they were watching him. And I don't know that they were certain that I knew how to help him, because they were just zoomed in on him to make sure. As soon as they got done, they checked in on him.
Same with the
and
guy
I thought that was awesome.
The little girl over here, she was telling me all about her star punch, and she's like, well, he doesn't have any, but he's working on it. So she was telling me that, you know, she knows that he needs some help sometimes, and so she would remind him across the table. So I saw that too. There was definitely a check-in system. I remember Kirsten saying that the model that they looked at didn't quite fit us, and so they did some changing and some tweaking and made it fit our situation better so that we could see as many as we could in one day.
It's so authentic, I think, is what I I love about it is you walk in and you see real life happening. You know, when you go to a workshop, you find out about all these amazing things, but you don't see it happening with kiddos. And so I love that it's so authentic.
It helps you reflect on your own teaching, but it also validates. Like, we went into one classroom and I just thought, oh, that's kind of cool because I do that, and I just didn't know if anybody else did that as well.
Right.
So.
And I love that our building is so open to it. Nobody's scared to have people come in because they know that it's just, you know, we just genuinely want to see what we're doing. And
there's no judgment. There's just, you know, it's just a very positive thing.
Peer observations can be formal when using something like a pineapple chart, or less formal when inviting someone to observe your classroom using Observe Me or Model Lab classrooms. Whichever design is used, the purpose is to learn from each other through observing what the teacher is doing and or what the students are doing. Again, these individual observations are made more productive when conversations happen before and after the observation.
We've really made an effort the last couple years to learn from each other through peer observations. So we have days during the year that are built into our professional learning calendar where a substitute teacher, guest teacher, comes in our building, relieves teachers for pockets of time where they can really observe other people who are masters at their craft.
In our building, we do peer observations, and that was brought to us by our principal. And he allots a certain time each month where we can sign up to be able to observe another colleague, another teacher in the building, and sometimes even outside of our building. And by doing this, we're able to see what other teachers are doing in our building, how we can improve ourselves by using that information, or by an affirmation of, yes, I'm doing those things too. I feel good about that, but how can I improve by using some of these things that I've learned? It is our choice to sign up. It is not something mandated that we have to do. It's something that we choose to do and choose to do so gladly. Because in this way, we're able to go not only to teachers we teach with every day, but also to other grade levels, such as 3rd grade or 4th grade or 5th grade, to compare what do I need to do in a 2nd grade classroom to prepare those students for 3rd grade and beyond.
Okay, so peer observation is one of the reasons why I was really excited to come to this building this year. And so on a peer observation day, we get a sub, and she comes in and covers for us while we go and observe somebody else in our building that we would like to learn. And even though I don't teach math, I feel like that problem solving and the work she's done with teaching kids about their brains is important. So as I walked around today and I watched her kids doing CGI and coming up with different ways to solve the same problem and doing it in their own way and being able to explain it to themselves, their teacher, and each other, it just makes me think about in science what I'm going to change as far as having my kids reflect and observe without just hurrying through an experiment, really giving them the chance to really think about what we're doing and become problem solvers, not just kids who are just rotely doing something I ask them to do.
The purpose of it is to build efficacy, both self-efficacy and collective efficacy, through the observation of others. So if I'm observing a teacher who's a master at a particular concept that I would also like to master, I'm going to be more confident in my competence after seeing that person and having that person readily available as an additional resource. Also, it benefits this concept of collective efficacy in that as we see others excel in different areas, we begin to trust and become more confident in the group's competence. And that would be the ultimate goal, is just to really recognize others and the excellence that they bring to the classroom day in and day out so that we can learn from them and also really excel with them.
The other great part about peer observation is it gives us an opportunity to be with other teachers, to visit with other teachers, collaborate, and work on other ideas with each other. Plus, the good part is you have this great camaraderie of knowing this person, getting to know this person better, and they get to know you better as well.
Our building is pretty large, so sometimes it's hard for us to get out of our classrooms and see different teachers and what they're doing. And so as we do peer observation, I just see I'm as far away from my own classroom as I can get right now, and I'm excited to get to talk to her and just learn about some of the things that she did. I think that's going to change our culture as we open our classroom doors, come out and discuss what we're doing. We can all learn from each other, and just it's going to grow us as teachers, and it's going to grow our relationships as a staff.
Results from peer observations and the pineapple chart have really, number one, have been our teachers' appreciation of each other. They see everybody working diligently. They see everyone researching and experimenting with new ideas. They see others' strengths. We really try to view ourselves as a strength-finding school, and we look to find strengths both in kids and adults, and really utilize those strengths for school improvement. So I've seen a lot of experimentation too with new ideas, because they realize that, hey, everybody is trying and taking risks with new concepts and ideas. So I'm going to as well.
Once in 9 weeks, I think it's once every 9 weeks, we have peer observation day scheduled where they pull in a sub, and we sign up for a 30-minute to 45-minute period that we can go observe anyone in our school. It can be in our district, it can be in a different school if we request that. But that's been ideal, because we have a lot of people that have expertise in Shobi and teaching reading, and we have new programs that are happening all over, and it gives myself the opportunity to go and see how those programs are working, how teachers are teaching the programs that we've adopted as a staff. I know we adopted a writing program, and it's been great, because some of us have really popped around and watched other teachers teach that writing. That's been helpful.
A strong professional learning community also allows teachers to get into each other's classrooms. So we do a lot of peer observation times where principals, literacy coaches, counselors will cover for a teacher so that they can get into one of their colleagues' classrooms to see the teaching and learning happening in it firsthand. It's a safe place to start. It's also an easy way to learn from each other. The teachers at our building have really asked for time to see peers, and they learn so much through those firsthand experiences. So as an administrator, I gladly support that and provide the personnel to have them be able to visit a classroom in the building.
So a few years ago, our district decided to implement a program where teachers serve as models for other classroom teachers, mostly for our first and second year teachers. But we have teachers who have become essentially model classroom teachers. And when we got those model teachers selected and identified, they went through a process where they were observed by a team and truly were vetted to ensure that their processes were the type of processes that are exemplary and that other people could actually observe and gain knowledge from. And these model teachers decided when they first got together they weren't the models, they were still learners, and they didn't want to be called model teachers, so they asked if they could be called lab classroom teachers. So our lab classroom teachers open their classrooms up a couple times a month for visitors to come in and observe their effective instructional practices. We have them coming in during small group guided reading, and then we also have them coming in during our math instruction as well. So first year teachers, second year teachers have the opportunity to go and watch exemplary learning in our elementary classrooms. And that program has grown quite a bit over the last couple of years. And at this time, I'm working toward identifying teachers who are effective at using engagement strategies on a regular basis.
I jumped on the Observe Me bandwagon, and I have 2 different Observes Me this year. The first one is just a little note, and it takes you to a Google form, and so anybody who comes in my room can critique and give feedback on specific goals that I have. Like, for example, I would really like to make sure that my questions to my students are higher order, and so as that person is in there, they can fill out this Google form and say, yes, or I see that you could have done it this way. Anytime you're getting feedback from people who are in your room, you're going to grow as an educator, and that is my ultimate goal. And so, and sometimes when you're the observer, you see things that maybe I don't notice, which is great. And it's an easy form because you just scan the QR code on my door, and then they can fill it out anytime they're in my room. I also this year added an Observe Me for students. I need feedback from my students, and I need to not wait until the end of the year to get the feedback. It's too late. So sometimes in the past, I've done like a survey at the end of the year. What did you like best? What do you want to know? You know, what did you like about it? And what do you need more help with? And that was too late because I can't help them after they leave my classroom. And so I do an Observe Me form to where students can fill out that Google form at any time for any feedback that they're given, and they know that I will take that feedback and I will really try to make my class relevant for them and take that to heart so that we have a classroom they want to be in, a classroom they're excited to learn in. So I cannot stress enough my desire to get feedback from others that are in my position and the students who I'm there to serve.
Observe Me invitations can be what we want them to be. One might observe district, building, or individual instructional goals that can be general or specific in nature. No matter what, they all contain why, the purpose, how, the directions, and what, the feedback, so that everyone can get better. Collaborative dialogue is our next category. Collaborative dialogue leads to doing. It involves planning together for a viable curriculum, developing usable assessments, looking at student work, and or creating authentic learning for our students. It shifts both our instruction and student learning as we create real-world applications for our students.
When we're shifting from traditional classroom work into more authentic learning, such as project, problem, or passion-based learning, really, again, we start with the why. Why is this so important? Secondly, when we start to talk about now, how are we going to do this? Understand that this shift takes time. A lot of us have gone through school for how many years? What percentage of our lives have we spent in a traditional classroom? And now we can't change on a dime. It's going to take time, small bites, and low on-ramps that eventually ramp up to something bigger.
Groups on the higher end, we could do some project-based things, and so that was a little jump-off point. So, for example, if we had a teacher that was really interested in NASCAR, they would do some NASCAR things and math, and another teacher that was interested in caves did cave exploration, and so it was almost like clubs in that way. And then they got to seeing that they could do more of that project-based learning with their whole class. They could start integrating their subjects. They could really immerse their kids in learning, and it's just growing from there.
We ended up going to three different districts, checking out what they were doing currently. Walden district up around Newton was one of them. We didn't want to do what they were already doing. I mean, they've invented the wheel. We don't want to reinvent it. So we started putting out ideas. What would we like to do? What do we want our program to look like? That's when we came up with this plan of we'll start off with a garden. We'll start off with working with our kids and getting them active in their own education, making them become where they have to buy into their education and understand that they're doing it more than just for the textbooks. Where we don't have the textbooks, the kids don't have that to fall back on, and they know it.
I think coming in new into a project-based school, you kind of sit back and watch. Are the standards being taught? Are the students getting what they need to do? Are we aligning the way we need to? Or making sure that there's no gaps in that? But the thing that has been so exciting to watch is how much everybody is willing just to go with it. If somebody throws an idea out, okay, let's try that. You don't see the walls that you see a lot of time in education. I'm not doing that. That's not how I do things in my classroom. You don't see that here. It's everybody is vested in, willing to try something new. In my mind, that reflective piece of reflecting on your teaching and coming back to figuring out what went well, what didn't go well, what would I change next time. 3 core things. When I look at teaching, if I can see a teacher do those things, that's what tells me a teacher's a good teacher. If they're willing to reflect on their practices and make changes based on their reflection, or keep doing the great things they're doing. And that's the culture around here.
The last category, analyze, reflection, is the caboose of each of the other categories. Whatever the learning design, we want to be intentional about analyzing our success by reviewing the data, receiving and giving feedback, and reflecting on the entire process. Data and data alone won't improve anything. We want to be student-focused and data-informed. It's the conversations, the reflection, and the steps taken as a result of the data that matter for student success. Also keep in mind that not all data is created equal.
We use our data to decide what we are going to be discussing and what strategies we are going to be implementing in our classrooms, and we feel it's essential to have everybody involved in those conversations.
You are looking at data, making decisions based on that data of what your kids need, being flexible and changing midway. If this isn't working, then we need to try this. And again, having those conversations.
Another program that we have started is where our classroom teachers are provided substitutes every month, and they can go and coach their peers on engagement strategies and structures. This strategy came from Kagan Cooperative Learning, and it's where they provide in-the-moment coaching. So the teacher, the classroom teacher who's being observed, instructs students. They might model for students what's expected of them for the content, for the strategy itself, the behaviors that are expected as well. And as the students are engaged in the strategy, the teacher peer actually goes and provides some coaching tips to the teacher that is actually providing the lesson. So then the teacher who is instructing students stops the students within the structure and strategy and provides some feedback, has them try it again, and usually that ramps up the level of engagement in the classroom. And then the teacher that is being the coach, they actually leave a feedback form for the teacher that they can follow up with later on. And it's a really nice program that we're able to provide because we do have some funding to provide substitutes for the classroom teachers to go and actually do some peer coaching. And that has been happening in our school district for a very long time now. And our teachers find it to be very effective. They like being able to have those collegial conversations with another teacher. That's very powerful.
So we're going to work on giving high quality feedback and helping the teachers to reflect on their practice so that in the end we can improve instruction and do it in a very intentional way.
Learning happens in so many different ways, in so many moments, and when that person's ready to come to that learning and it clicks, that may happen in a conversation we have one-on-one. It could be in a text that somebody sends me. So looking at all of those opportunities as moments for reflection and growth, and taking those pieces, that feedback, some of it may fit for that teacher, some of it may not fit for that teacher. How do you take that and improve your practice and know that getting better, I believe our mission statement is the relentless pursuit of excellence. So how do I continue to be on that pursuit?
As we have learned from all of the educators in this video series, we are better together. However, what does that really mean in terms of changing the culture of learning in your school? Well, the learning design you select is important, very important. Ultimately, the goal is to build collective capacity that leads to student success through meaningful collaboration. It is our belief at Learning Forward Kansas that collective capacity of educators drives collaboration in our schools. The word capacity means maximum productivity. Michael Fullen's definition speaks to the heart of educators' work. Building capacity is defined by actions that lead to an increase in the collective power of a group to improve student achievement. Fullen continues to help us understand when he says, Collective capacity enables ordinary people to accomplish extraordinary things. And there are two reasons. One is that knowledge about effective practice becomes more widely available and accessible on a daily basis. And the second is even more powerful. Working together generates commitment. Collective capacity supports a dynamic culture, and learning thrives. As we continue to say, at our school, it is everyone's job to learn. A school culture that celebrates deep, meaningful learning through vibrant conversations and reflections creates a culture of collective capacity. In this culture, each educator knows that together, each student will be successful. It is not a program, it's not a single person. It is a culture of learning that includes all learners. Deep conversations around learning cannot be left to luck or chance. They require careful thought and planning about how to build communities of shared practice that requires a group commitment to work together to improve all of our practices. Practices about what matters most, student success. We are inspired by the wise words of Bill Summers in his latest book, 9 Professional Conversations to Change Our Schools. He challenges all of us when he says, we owe it to our profession to open the doors and create a culture of learning in which we share knowledge, joyfully collaborate, and build legacies which are then passed on to new generations of educators. Once these deep conversations are in place, collective capacity increases, and as a result, we will be better together. Working together gives us hope, energy, and commitment to each other and to our kids. Learning Forward Kansas is here to support you. Our mission is to build the capacity of educators to establish and sustain highly effective professional learning. When we are inspired to learn, our students win. Happy learning and leading together.